Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, and that is about adaptation. So as you can see here, this is the typical end to a typical exchange in a HEMA tournament. You get about maybe 5, 10, 15 seconds to walk back to your corner, listen to the judge allocate points, but in that time you have to do something very crucial. You have to figure out what you're going to do about the opponent that you're fighting. Whether or not you had a good exchange or a bad exchange, what you need is the ability to interpret the information that you gathered from your exchange, and you need to compartmentalize it so that you can very quickly come up with a solution to whatever problem you might be having, and you need to do it in that 15 to 20 seconds. So how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to do it with a system that allows you to conveniently put fencing styles into nice little boxes so that you can both analyze your opponent's style and your own style and come up with a solution to the problem that's presented. As you can see here, I have divided these sections into 4 nice, convenient little style agnostic boxes. But if you want to have your own method of understanding fencing, through maybe the lens of Fiore or Lichtenauer, then you're perfectly fine to do that. And as I'll talk about later, I would honestly encourage people to use a system other than mine. But for what it's worth, this is mine. Basically, I define all exchanges through attacking, defending, and then deep and shallow targets. And I find that it does a very, very good job of telling me exactly what I want to know about what my opponent just hit me with or what they're doing. So our first example here is going to be attacking shallow. And for me, that is people who do a lot of very strange one-handed techniques. That could be a Geistlin, that could be a one-handed thrust. Basically anything that's very high risk but is unlikely to hit a very good deep target. For our next example, we're going to be talking about defending deep, which is a favorite of mine, and that's any fencer who generally stands stock still while the other person attacks, throws up a very strong parry, and a follow-up deep cut, either with maybe an Oberhau or in this case, Zwerkaus. For our third example, we're going to be talking about defending shallow, which is basically everyone's favorite tippy-tappy hand sniper, the kind of person who will always be walking backwards, waiting for you to expose your hands by throwing a committed attack, tapping you on the hands, and then moving outside of measure. For our final example, we'll talk, of course, about attacking deep. This is any person who generally advances forward and throws one deep committed attack, whether that be a shield howl or potentially steps forward and engages in a grapple. So now that we have our 4 categories, we have to do the hard part, which is figure out how exactly we want to adapt and how we want to compartmentalize our opponent so that we end up successful. And this is where things get complicated because for a lot of people, they don't necessarily have a favorite play or a favorite technique that fits into all 4 categories. And there might be something that your opponent is doing that also doesn't really fit into one of these 4 categories. And in my opinion, what you really have to do is make them fit, because it's far more important that you know what you want to do against a type of fencer than for them to have considered themselves that type of fencer. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if you really love attacking deep, which here is personified by just stepping forward and throwing some kind of attack or grapple toward a deep target, and your opponent also loves attacking deep. This is a situation you see come up in tournaments all the time where 2 people just walk at each other and they plow into each other, and 9 times out of 10, the better grappler wins that exchange. And let's assume that after doing that once, you realize that you are not the better grappler and your opponent is winning this interaction. What are you going to do? Well, obviously, you want to change your strategy to a different category, but which category you pick depends on which of these other ones you're most comfortable and trained with. For example, defending shallow is a very common response to someone who attacks deep, because by walking backwards and creating distance, you can easily tap their hands while they're trying to do something like just parry and go for a grapple or throw a shield howl or a shield howl. And it's often very easy to hit those exposed hands and run fast enough backwards to stay safe. But if you can't run fast enough backwards, or your opponent has a good enough deep attack, you might instead consider deep defending, aka standing your ground, going for that big parry, going for that big follow-up. But again, the problem might be that if they're very good at grappling, you don't have the time to stand your ground and your follow-up cut gets stuffed. So maybe your solution then is to go all the way to attacking shallow. before they have the ability to get up their momentum and throw their deep attack, you throw that Geistling to their leg, preventing them from walking forward, and or that one-handed thrust straight to their face, and using the superior range that you have to keep them on the back foot and prevent them from doing what they want to do. All three of these are solutions that you could have to this problem, and all three of them are viable or not viable depending on what you're most comfortable with. But the important thing here is that the solution is never to continue to do your attacking deep that the other person is doing, because that is basically putting you into 50-50 territory, a situation where you not only don't know whether or not you're going to be successful, you actually have reasonable evidence to believe you won't be. So if there's any one thing that you take away from this, even if you end up making your own system with more or less than 4 categories, you want to have as many categories as you have strategies to win, and you want to have as many categories as you have applications of how other people tend to beat you. So it might behoove you to morph a couple of attacking plays together because at the end of the day, you like defending them in the exact same way. Or it might be good to separate several things into many different categories because you have a different strategy of defending against all of them. For example, thrusting isn't something that I really talked about in this system because in my opinion, I defend against thrusts the same way I defend against cuts. But that might not be the way that you like to do things. And if it's not, you should have a completely different system of your own that benefits both how you fence and how you see other people fencing. All right, that's going to be it for today. If you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send an email over at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.